Hello, welcome back to Scale Modelling Cafe. Welcome to the second part of the, now stand by, Hispano Ha-1112.K-1L Tripala conversion. The fuselage halves had already been partly butchered for the unsuccessful Mulberry kit, so go and watch the part one if you're wondering what all that about is. But all I did is cut along the paddle line here, and this is to fit the new SBS resin part. I just offered up a bit of a dry fit first just to see where I'm going to need to cut, and luckily it was down the panel line. Now the horizontal cut was slightly more complicated. The SBS kit is designed for the Tamiya kit, and that just literally neatly slots in. No real surgery required. However, obviously with the Eduard kit, with the nose parts being integral, it's a little bit more complicated. And I just tried to not remove too much, but there will be an awful lot of filling and rescribing later on. So just with the scalpel blade now, just squaring things off, neatening things up, and then going in with another dry fit. You can see there's going to be a gap at the front, but we'll deal with that with filler. The underside part was offered up, so the central part has been removed, again along the panel lines. And the fit here wasn't too bad. I had a reasonable step at the back, but that was just sanded flush eventually. Nose comes in two parts, so it's a simple job just to apply just a bit of black super glue just along the sort of ridge line here, which helps it connect. And this black super glue from Ammo of MIG, it's very runny actually, and it can get everywhere, so you do have to be slightly careful. So we'll just run it along the grooves, and then we'll just stick the two parts together, and the fit is really nice. I did end up using just a little bit of Mr. Surfacer along the seam just to seal things in, but you can see how nicely that fits. It's a beautiful fit. And then just backing up with a bit of extra glue on the inside. Not really necessary, but belt and braces. If I've got the glue there, why not? Onto the wings now, as you can see, and there's a little bit there just forward of the sort of gear, where the gear leg would go, and that's really fragile. In fact, look, there you go, I've snapped it off. Bit of a weak part, and that's only because I've removed that centre section. Nothing to do with Eduard, that's just me, a little bit of clumsiness. So easy enough to fix that. I'm going to glue it to the wheel well part. And then build up the rest of the wheel well, and then I'll just glue the wing part together with a bit of super glue. Just going to touch that in with the tip of the knife blade, and like I say, this is very thin, this black super glue, so capillary action will work here and it will seep into the joint. I'll just hit that with a bit of accelerator, and then I can sand it flush, and actually you'll never know that broke after it's all been cleaned up. So in with the ammo sanding stick, and just regular checks, just with a fingernail, and then the ultimate check will be the primer later on. But it was a perfect repair. The Eduard kit, it fits quite well. Sometimes you can get a little bit of a step here at the sort of wingtip joint, but it wasn't too bad on mine. And then just touching it on the leading edge, just being very careful that I don't get any sort of runs over the top, because I'm holding it with my fingers and it's really, really annoying when the glue runs under your fingers and you get a nice fingerprint in the plastic. Adding a shim here, this is going to help the resin part to seat correctly. As I said though, I did end up with a bit of a step, but that was easily sanded. You'll see that in a minute. Just a bit of tape on the leading edge, just holding that one down. That didn't fit as well. Two-part epoxy, and I'm using this more and more actually. There's a little bit of flex with it, but it does bond really, really well. It's a really, really strong bond. So just speeding up the mixing of it, and then we'll just apply it to the resin. Now the disadvantage with this stuff is and the advantage I suppose, disadvantage and advantage is the drying time. It's about 5 minutes. So it does give you a bit of time to manipulate it, more so than super glue. But also you do have to kind of hold it in place for a good 5 minutes. Just adding a little bit extra on the inside now, and this is what I'm using this stuff more and more for, is just putting it on the inside. Careful sanding now, just to get rid of that step. And what that'll do is obliterate the strengthening strips. But you'll see them being restored right at the very end of the video. Restoring some of the panel lines. There was a panel line here on the real thing. So just going in with the scriber and restoring that. I never used to like this trumpeter scriber, but I'm using it more and more now actually. And then obviously going in and restoring some of the plastic. A bit of a waste of time this actually, because I do use a bit of filler and end up having to rescribe again when I attach the wings to the fuselage. You'll see the joint at the back there is a sort of V shape, and that's not a natural panel line, so really that does have to be filled, sanded, and then a horizontal line, if that makes sense, perpendicular line, scribed in its place. And again, you'll see that later. Restoring some of the rivets now. Again, one of my favourite tools. This is from MDC. Some plastic card there I've added just to help the resin part seat. And also that's going to disguise any sort of ugly glue marks or anything like that. I'm doing this with the canopy closed, so not too much of a problem. You could just paint it black and you'll never see it, and you can see on the other one I did restore a little bit of the cockpit detail. Time to paint up the cockpit, straight from the box. This is a weekend edition, so there's no photo etch. But I did have a leftover Eduard space set. You'll see a bit of that in action in a minute. So base coat of MRP RLM66, and then I lightened it and just created a bit of depth with the lightened tone. Got some of the decals and some of the sort of 3D decals applied on the starboard wall. It's very shiny, ready for a wash. The seat belts here were the kit decals applied to lead foil. Not exactly successful, I must add. But out here, I don't have my spares box with me. Not that I have much spares anyway, but yeah, it would have been nice to use some photo etch seat belts, I think. But as I said, canopy's closed, and it just about passes muster. I did have to do a bit of repainting, retouching. And there's the final cockpit. With the fuselage halves joined, I then rescribed, or actually technically scribed, the top seam, top and bottom of the fuselage. I'm using a razor saw here because it was glued together with super glue, and I do find that a scriber struggles a bit with super glue because it can be quite hard. Just restoring the lateral panel lines over the top as well with the razor saw. It's a quick job, and that all gets polished down, and then the panel lines get cleaned out with a toothbrush, and then I'll go in with a little bit of extra thin just to neaten things up, melt away any residue, and that'll make the panel lines sort of blend in with the kit panel lines. Very quick job. Wing to fuselage here. Now you'll note I didn't glue the cockpit floor to the wing roots. That's so I can use a little bit of wiggle room, a little bit of a manipulation to improve the fit. Likewise, the top of the wing wasn't glued to the sort of top of the radiator. Again, just so I can move things around, just to help improve the fit. Wing to fuselage joint, always a focal point of any model, and it's worth taking the time here to get everything lined up. See the advantage of not gluing the floor to the wing roots or the top of the wing to the radiator. Just allows you to manipulate the parts. Leading edges now, and I had not glued the resin bit to the underside of the wing at the front, again, so I could maneuver and manipulate, and that's all going to be tidied up later. Now for the main event, the nose going on, and I'm just going to tack it in place with a bit of black super glue, hit it with a bit of accelerator, and just hold it in place, let it set up, and then I'll go in and back it up with a bit more super glue then in the joints. This black super glue is really good in that it is quite thin, and it will use capillary action as and where. Ooh, bit of sanding dust. We'll get rid of that, zoom out, and then show you the nose glued in place, and you can see some big gaps there, but we'll deal with that in just a second. But I'm pleased with that so far. This is my filler of choice. It's the Mr. Hobby epoxy, analogous to milliput, but whereas milliput will dissolve in water, so you can really feather it in kind of with a wet finger and some sort of moulding tools. This stuff won't. It's got a plasticizer in it, so it repels water, but you can still smooth it with a wet finger. But because it's got that plasticizer in it, when it's dry, it will sand and scribe exactly like plastic. And that's why I love it so much. It's really easy to blend in to the surface and just feather it in, polish it back up. And then when you do run a scribing tool across it, it won't chip at all. It scribes beautifully, just like plastic. And as long as there's no steps or anything like that in it, and you have done a good sanding job and blended everything in, then it's almost like the scriber, well, not almost, the scriber doesn't know it's there. So that's the extent of the filler. And then just going in with a wet ammo sanding stick, we can start the laborious job of blending everything in. There's that lower wing joint that I mentioned earlier. And after the sanding, that's what we're left with. Smoothing everything out, just checking it with my fingers and thumbs. And I'm pleased with that. Now for the scribing. So a bit of Dymo tape, the trumpeter scriber, which I do really like actually. I like that a lot. And notice I'm just inboard of the join. I don't want to risk hitting any of the super glue, which is going to be hard and it will sort of cause things to chip and skip. So I'm just inboard of the join on that one. But you'll see in a sec how I deal with the horizontal one. Now doing the horizontal bit, that is going across the joint and the glue. So just trying to be a little bit more careful with that one. Out with the razor saw again. So on curves and radiuses, I do find the razor saw is much easier, as you can kind of turn it as you're drawing it back. I'd used a little bit of Mr. Surfacer just to seal in those wing roots. That excess is removed with the cotton bud and some Mr. Hobby thinner. And then once the scribing job is done, I can come out with the riveting tool and just restore some of the rivets. This is tricky, trying to get this to go in a straight line. As you can see, I'm doing it freehand. I normally use a bit of a template, but the fuselage is so narrow on a 109, it is easier to go freehand, but you do have to be careful because it's very easy to get a little bit of a wobble in there and then that'll look awful. Some of the rivets on the fuselage from the sanding were not exactly obliterated, but they wouldn't show up under a paint job, even with MRP. I did damage them quite a lot. So they were restored, and then I just went in along the joins as well, and a little bit round the nose, and just added a few more rivets in, just to blend in the nose with the rest of the airframe. Here's that Eduard space set. So not soaking it like a traditional decal, just soaking the back of the paper and then putting that down on a flat surface because it can curl up. And then just a few seconds later it releases. You see there I've got the Ammo Ultra Glue all ready. Just going to apply that with a micro brush. And I'd added the kit instrument panel, the blank one, to the resin nose, and then it was a relatively simple, straightforward job just to add that instrument panel after the airframe was complete. A little bit unusual, I know, but sometimes just going off-piste a little bit can really pay dividends. No gun sight on this. This aeroplane had no armament. There was a bit of a step here at the join between the windscreen and the nose, so all I did is I just chamfered the windscreen, which would blend that in, and then with a bit of RLM66 to check the joints, we're looking good. I nearly forgot this little scoop on the bottom. That's just added with just a little bit of the black super glue. And here's those strengthening strips I mentioned ages ago. So I cut them out of vinyl with my cutter, and I'm just going to stick those on, trim them off, and then with the MDC punch is just add the rivets back in. And it's a really good technique actually, because it really is very neat. And once that's sealed under primer, it won't lift, so it's safe to use. And there we are. That's it. The airframe is complete. And in the next episode, we're going to paint the aeroplane. I'm going to make up a Barrett grey and spray all the markings and do a little bit of light weathering. So join me then. Cheers. Bye-bye.